fix it.
Work it up. All right. We got to make sure
Yeah, I
we
just
have
saw
this
the
sustained
notification come up
awkward
on YouTube
silence.
here, and like I was wondering this the other day, but how is it that like Yarvin will say that the capacity for irony is increasing, yet everyone is somehow becoming more autistic and literal. Isn't that kind of an interesting
Yeah.
dichotomy?
Those are
I can see how they're both true, but it just strikes me as a fairly intriguing combination of things to be increasing in the world.
it's fascinating that that reality just kind of boils down to being a whole bunch of paradoxes all encountering each other all at the same time.
Mm.
Let's type this in here. 25% off any order over $75.
Yeah, I just found another little sample packet of the everyday soft gels for the CBD,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I'm saving. I know I need to sleep because I'm doing this squat program from hell, small off. Just rush. It's just some Russian program that just beats you to death with squats, and I have to go like heavy-ish. Well, it's all kind of heavy, but like I have to go annoying, even more annoying than usual on Saturday, and so I know I need to sleep Friday night, and I'm saving those soft gels so that I can definitely get a good night of sleep because typically I'm on the like 4 to 5 hour of sleep per night plan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know that I'm talking to a father of a newborn right here, and I'm going to get no sympathy, but like I have not lived my life in that way, so I'm not. I would prefer to get more than 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And one night I took the two soft gels that were a sample from Green Paloma,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm translating for our American speaking audience, Carlos. Um, this battle saying the wrong name. So, but but yeah, they actually they knocked me out. I think I slept the whole night through, and I don't know if it's just coincidence, but I'm gonna give it another try on Friday.
They're
But it
great.
was the everyday soft gels, 10 milligrams. So I'm probably gonna be ordering those, and I will be using promo code King.
That's right.
Damn it, that's right. Get my 25% off right there.
I've actually, so I got right here, I got the thing of the THC gummies. Good timing, train. So this is, of course, we're talking about Paloma Verde, our favorite, beloved sponsor of this show. Shout out Carlos and Vanessa Abelar. So they sent us, Steven and I, as we took them on as a sponsor, they sent us a little package of samples. So I've got this premium THC free CBD salve stick. This muscle rub stick is phenomenal. So just before we got started here today, I did an interview this morning with Mark Clare over at Lions of Liberty, and we spent almost 2 hours talking. And for whatever reason, when I sit here and talk, I always get my shoulders up like this. And so when I finish, I kind of relax and I'm like, oh man, my neck is all sore. And I kind of got a kink in my neck last night while I was sleeping. So I know when I wake up in the morning, I know that it's basically a race to see how much I can get done that day before the headache just finally just overwhelms me and knocks me out. So that's what today is. But just before we got started here, I whipped out this little salve stick and just rubbed it all over my neck and shoulder. And I don't even feel anything anymore. It started working within 5 or 10 minutes. And I wouldn't say, I can't make a claim like it took away all of the pain, but it definitely cut it down to where it's just a dull roar and I don't even notice it. And I've encountered very few things in the world that actually have an effect that quick and that effective without like weird tingling or anything like that. So there's that. And then my favorite is the gummies. I love gummies to begin with, like gummy bears and what do you call them? Lifesavers, the Lifesaver gummies. Oh, I'm a freaking sucker for those. So I love gummies, just period. But these THC free CBD gummies, they're green apple flavor. They're absolutely phenomenal. You've got 10 milligrams in each gummy. There's 30 gummies in this one here. And when he first sent them to me, I pulled one out right away, opened it right up, popped it in my mouth. And then I went out and went for a walk out in the sun with my two boys, the canine one and the not so canine one. And I just noticed after 5 or 10 minutes of walking out there that I just felt really content. I just felt relaxed, happy, alert, but just content. I just felt great. And I don't feel that very often. I haven't felt that in a while. So shout out Paloma Verde. Go to palomaverdestore.com. That's PALOMAVERDE store.com. And you can use promo code KING to get 25% off any order, $75 or more. And if you sign up for their email list, you'll get an additional 10% off. So you can get 35% off one order. So once again, palomaverdestore.com, promo code KING. And we thank them very much for being our first ever sponsor, except for Mudwater. Mudwater will always be, no one can touch Mudwater. I mean, what kind of company would let you give out shares in the company to anybody who uses the promo code? It's just absolutely phenomenal. So anyways, welcome aboard, folks. This is another episode of King Pilled. Yeah. Carlos is hilarious. He's great. He just started his own podcast too, by the way. This sucks. I completely forgot what it's called. So if he shows up in the chat here, just Carlos, throw out the name of your podcast and I'll give it a shout out. He's a good guy. I talked to him on the phone for a little bit when we set up the sponsorship deal, and he's a real one, as they say. So yeah, anyway, shout out Carlos and Vanessa, palomaverdestore.com, promo code KING. So if this is your first time here, or if it is not your first time here, this is still an episode of King Pilled. And my name is Matt. I am one of the hosts here, and then the other host is Liberal Steve. But he typically checks out because he's not a very reliable fellow, and so this unwashed bum here sits in for him. So you may get to see Liberal Steve at some point today. He might drop in and make an appearance, but you might also see Jason Stapleton. He may show up. There's a number of different people who could possibly show up. This is Steven Messina, folks. He's the other co-host here. So you can follow me real quick before we get started. So you can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and that's where I do the majority of my shit posting. But then also I've got this shirt on here today. If the news is fake, how much of history is fake too? Shout out Gab. I got this shirt from Gab, and you can follow me on Gab at KingPilled. I have never posted anything. I don't even have a profile picture, but I think I've got something like 25 people following me there. So yeah, I'll be showing up there a little bit more here in the future. We've got some pretty fun stuff planned for the future, for stuff we're working on here with the show and with some different projects. I had a conversation with the one and only Vashti this last week, talking about logo design and branding for the show and like what we're wanting to accomplish. And it was a really, really fantastic conversation, and we're excited about what we're going to do. So thank you guys for dropping in to join us here for this live stream. Do us a favor and like the show and then share it, and then subscribe to our channel. And if you're at some point in the future, we'll have this uploaded to iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So if you're listening to this some point in the future, then if you haven't already, then subscribe and leave us a rating and review. Let us know. Let us know and let other people know what you think of the show and what you think of the thoughts that we're bringing to bear here. And we're trying to get this message in front of. We don't necessarily want to get this message in front of a lot of people because we don't believe in democracy. We think democracy is bullshit. But we want to get this message in front of the right people. We want to get it in front of the people, the movers and the shakers. Every society is governed by a small group of elites who have low time preference, and they're willing to stack cash and build for the future. And rather than sitting around and complaining that the world doesn't look the way they want it, they are in the business of building the world that they want to live in. Those are the types of people that we want to talk to here at this show. So yeah, if you know anybody like that, then share the show with them. If you know any communists, do not share this show with them. And the definition of communist is extremely broad. The majority of the people in America right now are communists, and I don't want anything to do with them here. We want an echo chamber. here at King Pilled. So only share this show with people who you think are going to agree with us and tell us how smart we are. Anyway, Steven, take it away.
Hi. I think this was an ad right here for the CBD products, evidenced by Matt's mood today. So if it has anything to do with those gummies, why don't you go ahead and order yourself a whole bucket full? I gotta say, I like the gummies too. And I wanted to ask what the difference was between the soft gels and the gummies, because I mean, there's no for me, if they're the same, there's no choice. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be chomping on a gummy or two, as opposed to just pop. I pop enough pills, you know, but gummies are a rare treat. So if I had an excuse every day to have a gummy, I would do that.
I would suspect that probably if Carlos shows up here, he can clue us in. But my suspicion would be that the gummies are probably not as concentrated. So the gummies are just more. If you want, I mean, they would still have the same amount. It's to both 10 milligrams. But my suspicion would be that the soft gels are probably a little more bioavailable, and the gummies are just more fun. So
yeah.
But he sent us both of them, so I don't think I've really noticed a difference between the two of them. I think the gummies probably take effect faster. I probably feel really I don't feel anything. It's it quiets down a lot of the kind of the constant noise in the back of my mind. It just kind of settles it down and it leaves room for peace. I think it probably happens fast with the gummies. So the soft gels. The soft gels, I just don't notice the effect as quickly. It's kind of like I noticed it in retrospect, like, oh wow, hey, I didn't feel that. I didn't have that constant white noise in the back of my head for the last little while.
Yeah.
The gummies, I feel it come on.
It turns into brown noise. You just hear Carlos in your head. You know, chill out, Bato. Oh, God damn it! Or I was being funny right in the train's gonna come too. No, listen, man. Gummies, soft gels, whatever gets the animals to stop telling you to kill hookers, like you were telling me about off air. And yeah, and just before we get started in the supporting listeners group, we are going to, it's for the train. I'm going to do a video where I just use the stick on my thighs and just show all the muscle relief you can get on your thighs. That's for supporting listeners.
Yeah. It's going to be we're going to use the slow-mo effect on our iPhones, or not ours. I'm not going to be involved in this. Steven's going to be filming his own thighs.
That's what you think. You're going to be involved.
Liberal Steve is going to show up. Okay, so what's up, John Hartman? Shout out John Hartman in the chat. Hey, there you go. There's Carlos. Hey, Carlos, what's the difference between the soft gels and the gummies? Is one more concentrated than the other? Give us the breakdown. And what was our other question that we had for him?
The other question for Carlos, so it's the difference between the soft gels and the gummies, and then I forget. I thought it was going to come to me by the time if I kept my mouth moving. Shit, no, I can't think of what it was. Oh yeah, does it affect memory at all?
Yeah, it's funny for anybody who hasn't done like a live show or something like this. You realize, at least this has been my experience. Half the time when you start talking, you don't exactly know what's going to come out. You just kind of know that like all the stuff is in there, and there's this dynamic where as soon as you're starting to perform, like you're in a performance, it's like your brain just forces that stuff to mesh together and come out. And so for me, I'm just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to start talking, and whatever's going to come out is going to come out, and I hope it sounds good. Be good what I say. Minder here in the comments said the news versus history being fake statement, is that a reference to Anatoly Fomenko's work, History, Fiction, or Science? No, I've never heard of that work, but it sounds interesting. Give us is that a book? Is that a documentary? What is that? I think what this is a reference to a tweet from a fantastic account that's gone dormant, Amused Chimp. He said, if the news is fake, imagine history. And that was one of the biggest red pilling moments of my life, when that thought really sank in, and it made me, I kind of like froze, and I was like, wait a second, I need to rethink every single thing I know. Because if the news is like clearly the news is hardly a objective retelling of events, and dispassionate, and it's nothing close to that. It's clearly a partisan, agenda driven machine. And some people, there's this conservative tendency to be like, oh, the good old days back in the 50s when the news wasn't biased, and or maybe the 80s or whenever. But if you read the right works of history, if you listen to some of the losers, the people who lost the war and then wrote about why they lost, you'll understand that there were no good old days. There was no time when the news has always been slanted and partisan and used as a weapon. The saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. That saying's been around for a long time. That shows you that that words are weapons, and narrative is a powerful tool. If you listen to Thaddeus Russell's recent interview with James Corbett, which is just absolutely phenomenal, James Corbett said that the most powerful weapon that has ever been created isn't the neutron bomb or the atom bomb or whatever else. No, it's not an explosive. The most powerful weapon ever was narrative, and narrative is used to build societies, and it's used to tear societies down. And right now, society is being just completely dominated and destroyed by toxic narratives, to use one of their words. And if we want to have any hope of extracting anything out of the collapse of this regime, then we need our own narrative. We need a more powerful narrative. And it just so happens that there is a narrative that exists that is the most powerful narrative that the human species has ever encountered. All narratives are all built around this narrative, and it's a hero's journey. That's the kind of the 50,000 foot view would be the hero's journey, and it's expressed in every Hollywood movie ever. If you listen to Vin Armani talk for any amount of time, he'll be talking about the hero's journey, and Joseph Campbell, Jordan Peterson refers to it. It's the idea of the hero who descends into the pit of hell, who fights with the dragon, who rescues the princess, and wins the prize, the princess, the pot of gold, whatever it is, and then ascends out of hell and takes his place at the throne in heaven, or whatever. That's the general story, and the most archetypical telling of that story was the story of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. And I talked about this I was talking with Mark Clare about how the story of Jesus of the gospel, and the birth and the life and the death and the resurrection and the ascendance of Jesus it's a story that's true whether or not the historical events actually happened. So this is the debate that people always have. They always have the debate of, well, is the Bible a work of history? Is it a true retelling of factual events, or is it a collection of stories and metaphors? And that was the other thing. Carlos, what's the name of your podcast? You got to tell us that. So the name of the podcast and the difference between the gummies and the soft gels. Those are the things we need to find out from our good friend Carlos. Okay, so with the story of the Bible, is it true, or is this a true story? Events that actually happened, or is it just a collection of stories and metaphors that are fables that we can learn good lessons from? And my contention is that from a 50,000 foot view, it doesn't matter. It's true either way. And the term I've tried to use for it is a meta truth. It doesn't matter whether the actual historical events took place. The lesson that you draw from it is the same. And humans are a species of that mimics. The way that we learn, the way that we develop, the way that we survive and move our way through reality is through mimicry. And so that what the gospel calls us to do is to mimic the example. The example was Christ. He was the hero. He was the hero who descended into hell and then arose and made his way up into heaven, and he has the reward of overcoming death. And that's the hero's journey. And if you begin to mimic him, if you even if you just go through the motions, people are talking about LARPing a lot lately, and there's this big debate about whether LARPing is good or not. And the thing is, all humans learn by LARPing. That's what learning is, where you're doing the thing, mimicking other people, LARPing, live action role playing, and eventually, if you do it enough, then it becomes second nature and you begin to do it naturally. So what the gospel is it's just calling us to LARP as Jesus, to embody his spirit. And if we act as if we're embodied with his spirit, eventually we will be. Anyways, I don't remember exactly how I got off down that tangent. It was another example of just words are going to come out, and I'll go with it.
That libertarians are just so fucking stupid, is what it is. No,
that's a safe default.
It just kind of reminds me.
Los Libertinos. That's the name of Carlos's podcast. Los Libertinos.
Of course it is. That makes me so happy.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's great.
He talked to me about how when we were on the phone that his goal, really, obviously by the title of it, is he's targeting the Hispanic community, and he wants to use his business as a way of creating a platform for himself to reach out to his people, to the people that he cares about the most. They're his family. They're his direct family, his extended family. And so he's doing it the right way. Carlos is a real one, as I said. He begins by generating value for others. He started his business where he's helping other people. He's solving a problem for them. Like, this is the principle of capitalism. Like, I'm not going to come to you and demand you give me something. I'm going to offer something to you, and then when the principle of reciprocity, you offer something to me in return. This is the basis, the foundation of a civilized society. This is the foundation of a free market, of global trade, all this sort of thing. The premise of it all is that I give you something of value, and then in return you give me something of value. And so we have an incentive to cooperate and be peaceful together. That's what Carlos is doing. He's starting by generating value. Once he's established himself as someone who creates value for other people, who gives them a product that they need, who employs people who need jobs, who he has suppliers that he works with, and they need his business. There's this network of cooperations. And once he's established himself, once he's made a name for himself, and he's gotten a reputation within a given industry as generating value for people, then he comes and says, I have ideas that I think would be of interest to you. Do you want to know more about them? And that makes his words much more powerful. People are much more willing to hear what he has to say because he has skin in the game. He's put his money where his mouth is. He's put his time where his mouth is. And he's not just shooting off the mouth, telling people stuff that they don't want to hear. That's a good lesson. I mean, this is the principle. This is one of the principles of being king-pilled, is that you need to become king of your own life before you can bother trying to fix the rest of the world. If you haven't made yourself the king of your own domain, then you have no business commenting on the rest of the world. This is why universal suffrage was absolutely madness to people. They were like, you don't want to have just the average, some street bum voting. Like, who cares what his opinions are? Who obviously he's just going to do stuff that's self-interested, and he's just going to take whatever handout that he can get. You had to earn the right to vote. You had to prove yourself within your community that you're someone who is responsible, who takes responsibility for himself, who's raised a family, who's generated so much value to the community that they've in turn given him value that he's used to buy property and all these sorts of things. That was the principle of only landowners voting, and that illustrates the way that human societies organize themselves. That the people who have earned the respect, who have generated the value and demonstrated their worth, are the ones who have the power and have the influence and have the say-so over how society is going to progress forward. So Carlos said, soft gels have a nanotechnology formula that allow the CBD cannabinoids. I never know how that word said. Cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids. I'm going with cannabinoids.
Cannabinoids. There you go. Soft gels have a nanotechnology formula that allow the CBD cannabinoids to interact more effectively. Gummies don't have this technology, but have a high concentrate. So yeah, so it's the soft gels are in effect they're more powerful. Aligning interest. Yeah, that was the phrase that Carlos and I were talking about on the phone over and over again. Aligning interests. This is all about aligning interests. And this is, if we want to build a future where the world looks anything like what we want it to look like, then we have to start figuring out how to align the interests of lots and lots of people. Now, that's the definition of persuasion. That's the definition of creating a civilization, is getting a whole bunch of people with their interests aligned and gathering them together and working on projects on a grand scale. That doesn't work if you mash together a whole bunch of people who don't have their interests aligned. And in a society like that, where you've got a whole bunch of different people with a wide range of religious beliefs and cultural heritages and social habits, if you have all these people all crammed together in one society, there's no way that something like the non-aggression principle can ever see the light of day. Like you're never going to get anywhere with it because nobody has an incentive to follow it. Everyone has an incentive. It's a power struggle. Power is a zero-sum game, and everyone's in the business of trying to get a little bit more for themselves, and to do that, they have to take it from someone else. And so what ends up happening in that situation is that something like libertarianism, or people who have this idea of do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody, it becomes an empty suit that's going to be populated by whoever is the most aggressive, ballsiest, least shameful, or most shameless, craven power seeker. They're going to occupy that because all they're going to hear is the do whatever you want. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, that part doesn't matter. That part only matters if you have the power to retaliate against someone who hurt you. That's the only time that's ever relevant. So it just comes down to power. It just comes down to power struggles. And right now, the libertarian political message, this idea of limited government, of self-government, of personal responsibility, it's gone completely out the window, and it's been completely overrun by rabid progressivism, which is, I mean, it's communism striving for global conquest. And ultimately, this is the failure of liberalism. Libertarianism being a subset or a continuation of liberalism. Liberalism creates it's like what Spooner said about the Constitution. It's either been responsible for creating the world that we live in, or it's been powerless to prevent it. Liberalism is it creates, if you're thinking like a scientific sense, the culture, the actual like culture of the sample. Liberalism is a culture that incentivizes and promotes and is powerless to stop the growth of imperial ideas, imperial ideologies. And that's the world that we found ourselves in now. And you get people like the intellectual dark web, these guys, Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan and James Lindsay, all these people who talk, even Jordan Peterson, who's really grappling with this. Their desire is to save liberalism. But what they don't realize is that liberalism is directly responsible for the Church of the Woke. The Church of the Woke has just taken liberalism to its ultimate endpoint. They're the most honest liberals in a sense, because when you say do whatever you want as long as it doesn't harm someone, you're invoking relativism. Like you are now abolishing the idea of a standard moral code that binds a whole bunch of people. You've turned it into a power struggle, which is just honest. Like that's what life is. Human organizations are just power struggles. So, anyways, I kind of ranting here, but that's actually what this is about.
Yeah, if I could just throw a quote in, just because it's only one paragraph, but I read it the other day. I've been just rereading a lot of stuff from UR, which is unqualified reservations, and I imagine that most people listening to this know that. Libertarianism, and it is from an open letter to open-minded progressives, chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4, which is a really good one. If you're going to read one of the chapters, that's a pretty good one. Libertarianism in the late 20th and early 21st century has gained little political traction. And this is 2008 or 9, I think. So when I'm reading this, why? One, it opposes the cathedral, which controls most real power and does not deal kindly with its enemies. 2, by definition, it has no mechanism for using any power it does gain to create jobs for its followers, because it does not believe in the expansion of government. 3, it either appeals to anti-cathedral townies or conservatives, making itself unfashionable, thus unpopular, and thus ineffective as an opposition, or it tries to ingratiate itself to the cathedral, making itself thus ineffective as an opposition. It has nowhere to go. It cannot recreate the world of John Stuart Mill with its target-rich environment of Tory landlordism. So, and what this is like another topic that he goes into, where basically Murray Rothbard kind of repackaged classical liberalism out of the context where it originally kind of came from, where it was used sort of, the free market ideas were used to harm Tory landlords. Briefly summarizing. So basically, the libertarianism of today is just kind of a brilliant as a philosopher as he is sort of just repackaged from a different era, and therefore, might be intellectually intriguing, but is kind of practically moot, I guess.
Right. If you were to abstract away from actual reality and imagine a hypothetical reality that operated according to different rules, then libertarianism would be the ideal arrangement of the utopian society. That's the goal. Like, our goal is to get to the point where we have a society that operates according to libertarian principles. But in order to get to that point, you can't act according to libertarian principles, because acting according to libertarian principles ultimately, within the context of politics, ultimately just makes you a martyr. It's pacifism. But it's not pacifism, because libertarians are happy to get involved in politics. So they're not, if you're using politics and war being on a continuum, if you're getting involved in politics, you're jumping into the fight. So you're no longer a pacifist. You're not engaging. You're engaging, but it's like you're engaging without a weapon. So you're going to go get involved in the fight, but you're not going you're going to have your hands tied behind your back, and you're just going to look at everybody real mad, and like somehow you're going to win the fight that way. Like, politics is a fight. It's a war. It's a battle. It's a power struggle, because ultimately every society is going to be populated by these insane people who are determined to overrun the rest of society and force them to play according to their rules. This is the way every society ultimately gets to that point. And you have to have the means, the tools, the capacity to protect yourself from them. So really, if you take libertarianism and you define politicking as violence, if you were within the context of the NAP, if you were to take the NAP and you were to say the non-aggression principle and any initiation of violence or aggression against someone is wrong, and under that umbrella you were to put political action, you were to take people getting involved in political activism, if you were to recognize that as violence, then libertarianism could be coherent, because then you getting involved, you getting involved, you voting, you trying to take control of the state, trying to do whatever else, those things would be acknowledged as self-defense. And ultimately, that's the only coherent way to think of self-defense. You can't say that someone who's attempting to destroy the family, or is like trying to force critical race theory into schools, like those types of things, those have to be seen as acts of violence, as acts of aggression, or as violence, because they're destroying the foundations of civilization. They're undermining the law. They're undermining property rights, because they're undermining the values or the principles that sustain property rights, upon which property rights can only exist in a society that respects them. So if you're undermining respect for property rights, that's functionally equivalent to actually violating property rights. So if you want a libertarian society, if you want to create a libertarian society, these are the terms you have to think on. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. But then get out of the political arena. Don't get involved whatsoever. Go the agorist direction. Exist in the gray market, and try to pull as many people as possible out there with you. There has to be two different strategies. One is complete disengagement, not even commenting on it, because commenting is getting involved in the fight. Complete disengagement. Get out of it altogether, and focus on you. Build your own wealth. Teach your kids. Build a family. Move near people who think like you and believe like you. Create a community together, and just hunker down and try to keep out of the eye of Sauron. That's one approach. The other approach is recognize politics as war and engage with it on those terms, as if you're fighting a war. If you got into a war with someone, like say there was actual hand-to-hand, like fighting in the streets. If somebody was out there like punching someone and like shooting someone or whatever, someone was engaged in that process, you wouldn't look at them and say, "Oh, look, they're violating his property rights." You'd be like, it's a war and people are fighting. And that's what people do in a war. They fight and they try to kill each other. So obviously, like personally, I think that getting involved in the process of trying to kill each other is a very bad thing. I don't think that really does anything for anybody, and is only like, you should do whatever is necessary. Absolutely go to the absolute end of your rope to avoid getting in a situation where you are even party to people killing each other. Because just from a pragmatic perspective, because if you get to that point, there's no going back. You've completely, utterly changed your life, and you're going to have to play you're going to have to live your life going forward playing by a completely different set of rules. And that just seems like a real big headache to me. So just from a pragmatic standpoint, you should avoid that altogether. But when it comes to politics, you have to treat it like a zero-sum game if you're going to get involved. If you're going to get involved, it has to be for the sake of getting power, of obtaining power and holding power, of controlling institutions, taking over institutions, controlling them, and using them to create the world that you want to see. This is just the nature of how the system works. And if you have a problem with that, get out of politics altogether. The worst thing is the people who want to be involved in politics but want to pretend that the laws of politics don't apply. They want to pretend that they can act like a proponent of the non-aggression principle while being engaged with politics. And it will never be successful. You are actively working against your own ends. You are actively contributing to the destruction of a society that has any semblance of respect for property rights. And that's actually, here we're over half an hour in, and that's really the focus of what I wanted to talk about on today's show. I called it Weaponized Empathy in the Age of Autism. And there's both of those have double meanings here. Weaponized empathy and Age of Autism each have double meanings. So Age of Autism, obviously, there's a medical aspect to that, where we're in an era where there is more, where autism rates are the highest that they've ever been, and that's a product of a whole wide range of things. There's a whole bunch of things that have contributed to that and are contributing to it. I mean, I was just looking at a picture the other day. I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode, but there was a picture of ninth graders from 1955 or something like that. And it might have even been the 60s. And they looked like they were like 30. They looked like 30-year-olds. They were super mature and strong. All of them were skinny. They were all like powerful, healthy-looking people. Now, ninth graders have like round, chubby faces. They're like hardly even into puberty. They're just like, they're super, just childlike. They're completely childlike at what's ninth grade. Is that 14, 15? If you think about past eras, Amy and I are watching the show Rome right now, the 2006, I think, HBO series. And it's fascinating. Look, I mean, obviously it's a TV show, but there's quite a bit of accuracy to it. And it's fascinating looking at a society that treated what we would call children as adults. The boys reach, it's 12 or 13 or 14, and they're men. They're seen as men, and it's like women who get to the point of their mid to late teens who aren't married, like it's like they're losing all of their childbearing years. Teenage girls were seen as their responsibility was to get married and crank out babies. This is kids like in high school age. This is what the human species came from. This is how humans used to be.
What kind of jokes am I allowed to make because you're talking about young boys being viewed as men, and I was like, oh, I'll lay off that one. And then you, I mean, I'm dying over here. That's sort of my wheelhouse for humor. I've explored all other avenues of humor. I'm just bored with it at this point, and that's just the final frontier. And I just want to know: do you want to make 600 subscribers, or can I really go in on it? I'll wait till a couple of all right, okay.
I said I was making life hard on you, and I was waiting for you to say something like, "At least that's the only thing that's hard on you right now." I don't know if we're gonna make it, man. I don't know. Like and share and subscribe, please. Get us
Because
to
I gotta start.
1,000.
There's no way I'm gonna make it like 2 more episodes if he is talking about. Oh God, delicious young boys. Who are 18? I think he said 18. He said
18
18.
and above. 18 and above.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But yeah, so like that, like imagine the culture that you would have. Imagine what a culture would be like that treated children, what we see as children, as soon as they reach 12 or 13, they're adults. They have to function as adults. They have the responsibility of adults. They have to take on their in a lot of cases they would have children and they'd get married, but they still lived with their parents because they had to learn how to do they had to learn like build the strength to be able to build and protect and defend their own property. So you got these large extended families, and your family was your name. This was you protected your name at all costs because people wouldn't trade with you if they disrespected your name. So your life, your participation in civilized society depended upon your reputation, people's understanding or their recognition of your family name. It's a completely foreign dynamic to what we have now. Individualism has run amok, and we're to the point where everyone is so completely atomized that it's like parents hardly even have a say-so over their children anymore. We're getting everything completely atomized, and this is actually individualism. Read the book Why Liberalism Failed by Patrick Deneen. Liberalism creates the dynamic of an autonomous, atomized individual, which is the best thing for the state. Because if you are an autonomous, atomized individual who's not identified with your family, not identified with your church, not identified with any other sort of organization, then the state can control you. Then you can become the embodiment of the state. That's the perfect thing. So libertarians who are like, oh, individualism, they're creating the tools for their own destruction, the destruction of their ideology. So children, what we see as children today, back then, were healthy and strong enough and mentally and physically competent enough to bear children, because like engage in contracts like marriage and all of these things. But somehow now that's like madness. It's crazy to suggest, like if you hear about someone who got married under 20, it's like, wow, they're getting married really young. And that's getting older and older. Even now it's like, oh wow, you got married, you're under 25. That's pretty wild. You guys are really going for it. And I don't think this is just a cultural thing. I think this is a hormonal thing. There's so many different effects around us all day, every day now that have a deleterious effect on our hormones, whether it's the plastics all around us or the like cell signals and microwave signals and all the different networks and stuff that are constantly bombarding our bodies at all times. And then you've got birth control in the water. As all these different birth control hormones have been spread out through all these women. The chemicals eventually leave their body. They go into the water supply, and then that's what the rest of us are all drinking. And at this point, it's permeating out into the oceans. It's going everywhere, and we're all bathing in this stuff all the time. And all the different drugs, different prescription drugs, are all bombarding our body all the time, constantly. And our bodies weren't designed to withstand that. And once your hormones get screwed up, the rest of you is hosed. So circling back around, if I may, I suspect that's one of the biggest contributors to the rise in autism is an actual, like the psychological condition is this just destruction of the human hormonal profile. But then there's also, autism has become a meme, and people talk about on 4chan, they call them autists, and they have their weaponized autism, and they're playing off the stereotype, obviously, of autistic people being like socially not very competent, but then also having some point of just a phenomenal brilliance, where they might be just like have perfect pitch, or they're They can do like crazy math in their head, or they understand coding just by looking at like any sort of different things. There's that capacity.
Really good at impressions.
There you go. Really good at impressions. There's that capacity in the human cognitive profile. There's somewhere in there the capacity to be really, really good at some of these things. And those tend to go hand in hand. So people who tend to be really, really good with systems, with systematizing, also tend to be less good with social skills, the social dynamic, and knowing how to relate to other people relationally. And so you could see a problem here. We have systems that are collapsing and falling apart because people are increasingly unable to manage systems well. And the people who are able to manage the systems well, who are able to think kind of on another level where they can think on a universal scale with these, like putting different systems together, those people don't know how to communicate it. They don't know how to connect to other people and communicate their ideas well. And so that's one part of it there. This the nature of autism. So then the weaponized empathy. So what we're seeing today, the progressive movement, the Church of Woke, is weaponized empathy. They're doing this performative empathy thing where they claim that every single thing that they do is all in the name of empathy. They're all looking out for other people. They're compassionate. They're tolerant. Yada yada yada. And as they are in the process of completely destroying all of the bonds that tie society together, many of them genuinely believe that what they're doing is for the good of society or people or individuals or groups or whatever. The majority of them genuinely think of themselves as good people. And this is because their empathy capacity is destroyed. This ties back into the hormonal thing, but they don't know how to be empathetic. Sociopathy and psychopathy are rising, are increasing. People are the nature. It's part of the nature of technology. Shout out Uncle Ted. The nature of technology and connecting us, but also depersonalizing those connections, is breaking people's ability to relate and engage with other people on an empathetic level, to genuinely put themselves in someone else's shoes and think of the world from their perspective. As things are getting more and more radicalized, people are losing the ability to see through other people's eyes. Part of this is because the left wing, you notice this dynamic where the left wingers are like fundamentally incapable of seeing the world through the eyes of right wingers. Right wingers can typically describe the worldview and the values and the principles of a left winger pretty well, pretty easily. The majority of them. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Left wingers are completely, like, functionally, fundamentally incapable of seeing the world through the eyes of a right wing person. They can't even comprehend their values at all. They might as well be aliens from Alpha Centauri to them. And I think that these things go hand in hand. I think that leftism is fundamentally sociopathic. It's born out of a like sociopathy lends itself. Sociopathy creates leftism, and so it's not a coincidence that as leftism is on the rise and is growing and rampaging through society, that sociopathy would be doing the same thing. That I think the things all go hand in hand. But so you get this weird phenomenon where you have people who see themselves as noble, messianic, compassionate, tolerant, good people. And many of them sincerely believe that. And they are also the most evil, destructive, sociopathic, literally demonic people in the world. And they're just shredding everything that's good and beautiful about human civilization, human society. And in order to combat that, so that is weaponized empathy, weaponized quote-unquote empathy. They've taken a masquerading of empathy and they've weaponized it and turned it into a weapon that they can use to gain power. So then they get the benefits, as I've mentioned before, they get the benefits of having no power and having power at the same time. They get the benefits of advocating for the poor and making themselves rich simultaneously. This Black Lives Matter founder who has this like multi-million-dollar compound in LA now, she's a professional Marxist, and she's super wealthy. And I tweeted out that professional Marxism is a really lucrative business opportunity, which is fantastically ironic, but it's no coincidence. These things go hand in hand. Ultimately, Marxism, like radical leftism, is about power. It's about the accumulation of power through the destruction of civilizational structures. So you get the, Magoo's as victim rulers. Yeah, these are people who see themselves as victims while they're victimizing people. And so they've weaponized empathy. And what I'm proposing in return is that libertarian-minded people need to overcome their own autism in the meme sense, and they need to learn how to weaponize empathy in return, but use actual empathy. And so I wanted to pull up this thing here. It's a piece by Jonathan Haidt about moral foundations theory. And the piece is titled "The Largest Study Ever of Libertarian Psychology," and I'll put this link in the show notes afterwards. But I wanted to go through some of this because he talks about the psychology of libertarians or libertarian-minded people with respect to conservatives and liberals. And when you understand the psychological or the cognitive basis upon which libertarian and conservative and progressive people act, then you understand why they're acting the way they are, and you can predict what they're doing. So moral foundations theory is a sociological theory that he introduced in his book, The Righteous Mind. This is Jonathan Haidt. Haidt is spelled H-A-I-D-T. He is a liberal. He's very much he's like a 1990s liberal kind of. So he's not remotely conservative or even really very libertarian, as you might generally think of it. He's very much a liberal, but he's not insane. And so the piece here starts out, we've been deluged in recent years with research on the psychology and brain structure of liberals and conservatives. But very little is known about libertarians, an extremely important group in American politics that is not at home in either political party. And they did this survey. It says, unlike most surveys which force everyone to place themselves on a left-right scale, we've always allowed our visitors to choose libertarian as an option. So they're you're going to get a selection bias in there in the data. People who identify themselves as libertarian but may not necessarily, I don't think libertarian is a coherent enough idea, but I think that the data is still decent. So given our unique web platform where people register and then take multiple surveys, we have amassed what we believe is the largest and most detailed data set in the world on the personality traits of libertarians, as well as of liberals and conservatives. So they analyzed data from nearly 12,000 self-described libertarians and compared their responses to those of 21,000 conservatives and 97,000 liberals. It's interesting, they're seeing the differences. So you've got 12,000 libertarians, you have almost double the number of conservatives, and then...
Where did they find 12,000 libertarians?
I know
that's not all of them?
I was going to say they talked to every single one of them.
Okay, damn.
But then they have over 4 times the number of liberals as they do conservatives. So that right there might make me kind of question the data a little bit. And I hadn't really considered this before, but just as I was reading this, I was thinking about that I think that the data that they have is still very, very good. And I think that it's truthy in that, like, when you read it, it seems right. Like it just kind of feels right as you read it. It reflects reality. So I think it's pretty good. But that's just interesting that they have such a disparity in numbers. So it said, the findings largely confirm what libertarians have long said about themselves, but they also shed light on why some people and not others end up finding libertarian ideals appealing. Here are 3 of the major findings. Number 1, moral values. Libertarians match liberals in placing a relatively low value on the moral foundations of loyalty, authority, and sanctity. What moral foundations theory is 5 different moral values. And so there's loyalty, authority, sanctity, care, and fairness. And what they've discovered is that conservatives primarily value loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Liberals primarily value care and fairness. And it's not exclusive, but it's the ones that they prioritize. And liberals, my understanding, liberals or conservatives prioritize care and fairness, more than liberals prioritize loyalty, authority, and sanctity. So conservatives they have more of all five, whereas liberals are primarily just care and fairness. This is why liberals can't comprehend, like the loyalty, authority, and sanctity, like liberals can't really comprehend the right-wing viewpoint because they don't even value those things at all. So back to the piece here. So libertarians place relatively low value on the moral foundations of loyalty, authority, and sanctity. For example, they're not so concerned about sexual issues and flag burning. But they join conservatives in scoring lower than liberals on the care and fairness foundations, where fairness is mostly equality, not proportionality. For example, they don't want a welfare state and heavy-handed measures to enforce equality. So libertarians are like liberals in that they don't value loyalty, authority, or sanctity, but they're also like conservatives in that they don't really value care and fairness either. So they don't really value any of the five. This is why libertarians can't be placed on the spectrum from left to right. This spectrum that they've created, they can't be placed on the spectrum from left to right. They have a unique pattern that is in no sense just somewhere in the middle. They really do put liberty above all other values. So what happened is they did this moral foundations theory. They had the five, and then they had to create a sixth one just for libertarians, because libertarians basically are the people who don't really value any of the other things. Their primary value is just liberty. And where I think their system falls short is that these six different values aren't all equal. They're not all equivalent. They shouldn't all be weighted the same, because different ones have a different impact, I think. Some of them should be weighted more than others in terms of their actual impact on people's behavior, particularly with respect to politics and with people organizing themselves and self-segregating themselves. But anyway, so that was number one. Libertarians basically aren't like anybody else. They just value liberty. People who self-describe as libertarians. So point number two, on reasoning and emotions. Libertarians have the most masculine style, liberals the most feminine. That's probably should not be a surprise. We used Simon Baron-Cohen's measures of empathizing, on which women tend to score higher, and systemizing, which refers to, quote, the drive to analyze the variables in a system and to derive the underlying rules that govern the behaviors of the system. Men tend to score higher on this variable. So back to the systematizing. Systematizing would be, or systemizing, which would tie into the autism meme. They tend to be very good with systems, but the empathy thing just kind of isn't there. They don't operate on that level. Whereas liberals are very much empathetic, or see themselves as empathetic. They feel very much identified with other people, in other people. And I think there's, as a little sidebar here, the fact that liberals tend to be the most feminine is very interesting, because going back to the whole universal suffrage thing, by definition, if you have a system wherein the decision makers are not women, so like a voting system where women aren't voting or are primarily not voting, then the outcomes are basically by definition going to be much less feminine. And when you introduce the feminine impact into the decision-making process, it's definitely going to move things in the feminine direction. So you're definitely going to see, going back to the original values. So if men tend to be more focused on loyalty, authority, and sanctity, which is the conservatism thing, you're going to have a government that operates much more that way. But then when you introduce the feminine dynamic, you're going to get a government that shifts much more toward the care and fairness side. So this would be an explanation for why the welfare state exploded. One of the reasons why the welfare state exploded shortly after the introduction of female voting. And it's up to you whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'll leave it to you to decide, so that I can retain my YouTube channel for now. So it's I'll say a little bit more on that real quick. One thing, a massive misnomer is the idea that women in the past, because they couldn't vote, they were oppressed, and they were that they occupied second status in society. To imply that, to say that women were oppressed because they couldn't vote, is to say that voting is like the most important thing that someone can do. Women were very, very influential in society. Do you have this concept of that the man is the head, but the woman is the neck that turns him? That dynamic was very present in many cultures throughout human history. If you go back, and again, it's a TV show, but there's a lot of truth to it. The Rome, the HBO series that I'm in the middle of right now with Amy, my wife, the women were very influential. Like men, you watch men go back and they would be like having conversations with their wives and like, oh, should I do this or should I not do this? And the wife, the men very much took the wife's input into consideration. Ultimately, he was the one who would make the decision because given the structure of their society and how contracts were based and everything, it was his name that everything that was going to pay the price ultimately for his action. So he's the one who made the decision. But women were very, very influential. Women have always ultimately, like if you listen to Jordan Peterson, you look at the dominance hierarchies and the way that they're facilitated, it's ultimately women because women control whether or not the sex happens. And so ultimately men are competing for women and the women.
The hell that they do. Oh, sorry, that was a joke.
I've been sitting here waiting for you to get in.
Let's make it to 500 subscribers, shall we?
Yeah. But so women are the ones doing the selecting. Men are competing for the women, and the women are selecting. And so women control the direction of the society, because then ultimately women are the ones who are training and cultivating and nurturing the children. Back to the Tucker Carlson episode we did talking about the feminization of America. To repeat myself, I think that the raising the children part, that's the most influential thing any person can do with regard to creating the future. There's nothing that you can do that has a bigger impact on the future of the society and the direction that society goes than being the person who trains the children. If women really, really care about society going in a particular direction or the future of the culture valuing certain things, then it's they should be incentivized to take responsibility for raising children and for crafting children's minds. And it's no wonder that women end up being overrepresented in educational circles as teachers, because that's just a natural instinct for them. That's an impulse that they want to be involved in that process. But so anyway, so the idea that women who couldn't vote were oppressed is that you're operating from a construct that doesn't consider all the dynamics of power in a society. It treats the state as the only source of power in the society, and it's not. Anyways, back to Jonathan Haidt. So, okay, so men tend to score higher on systemizing, women score higher on empathizing. So then liberals score higher on empathizing. Conservatives tend to score higher on systemizing. Libertarians score the lowest of the three groups on empathizing and the highest of the three groups on systemizing. Note that we did this and all other analyses for males and females separately. On this and other measures, libertarians consistently come out as the most cerebral, most rational, and least emotional. And if you've ever met a libertarian, this shouldn't surprise you one bit. On a very crude problem-solving measure related to IQ, they score the highest. Libertarians, more than liberals or conservatives, have the capacity to reason their way to their ideology. Speaking of the power of the woman, she just blessed me with a wonderful thing.
Hi, Uncle Steven.
She says, "Hi, Uncle Steven." Love you, Mama.
Ooh, Uncle Steven, I like that.
Yeah.
That's for that's for the kid.
Yeah. She got a super She got a really, really cute picture, I think on Tuesday, of Eastwood, my son, the future God Emperor of the world, sitting in his stroller, holding her phone up, watching us talking on it. It's really, really cute. But he loves watching us on TV and seeing Daddy and Uncle Steven. So okay, back to this here. So on a very crude problem-solving measure related to IQ, libertarians score the highest. Libertarians, more than liberals or conservatives, have the capacity to reason their way to their ideology. And I would say that they don't reason their way to their ideology, but they're better at it than the other two. So again, libertarians are, so the first one here, that libertarians put liberty over all other things, all other values, above care, above fairness, above sanctity, above loyalty, above authority. All these other things that bind people together all these other things that unite groups of people, that enable groups to function. Libertarians put liberty over all of those things. So you should be able to see at this point why the libertarian political ideology never gains any steam, because it doesn't have anything that anybody wants to attach themselves to. It's basically, given this second point about libertarians being the most cerebral, most rational, and least emotional, libertarianism is basically just a bunch of high IQ nerds sitting around reasoning their ideology to themselves and not actually engaging with the broader culture. They don't even understand how the culture develops. They don't value any of the things that are necessary to create and build and nurture a culture. So point number 3, on relationships. Libertarians are the most individualistic. They report the weakest ties to other people. This is just... Looking at this study, it should be no question that not only is it reasonable libertarianism is a nothing ideology that has no influence on anybody, but it also never will be. It's always going to be that way. If you don't have ties to other people, how do you expect them to value your view of the world, to value the way that you see the world, and to value the things that you want them to value? If you can't even value them, how are they supposed to value you and your ideas? They score the lowest of the 3 groups on many traits related to sociability, including extroversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. They have a morality that matches their sociability, one that emphasizes independence rather than altruism or patriotism. In other words, libertarians, liberals, and conservatives all differ from each other on dozens of psychological traits, which help to explain why people, even siblings in the same family, gravitate to different ideological positions as they grow up. And that's basically it. So what my big takeaway from this, and what I'm wanting to communicate to you guys, is that empathy is not just a touchy-feely woo-woo thing. Empathy is an incredibly useful tool. It might be the most useful tool. If you have a burning desire to see more people share your view of the world, then, going back to capitalism, it starts with you being willing to see their view of the world and not just see it, but affirm it. You need to have empathy with them. You need to have empathy for the problems that they have and the issues that they're facing. Dave Smith tweeted the other day that his goal, his strategy here is to, I can't remember what he said. It was like to preach that red hot fire liberty shit or something like that. And then it was like that the stuff that people love, like it gets the people going. And I was like, so you're explicitly saying that your plan is just rhetoric. Like, people have existential problems they're facing, and your solution is bring them rhetoric. Tell them, hey, you should care about my thing and stop caring about your thing. That just, people aren't wired that way. People will never be wired that way. If you want people to care about your thing, you have to care about their thing. You have to affirm them. This is like a sales technique. When you're marketing something to somebody, if you want people to buy your product, you have to first recognize the problem that they have, and you have to identify how your solution solves their problem. But not just how it solves their problem, but how it solves their problem better than anything else. And then you further have to overcome the idea that if your solution solves their problem better than anything else, but it's much harder, much more difficult, if it's much more costly than anything else, you're stuck. You're SOL. So when libertarians are approaching people with a political message, what they're saying is, like, come vote third party for what? Like, to have a symbolic vote and like just do it on principle? Come join us. Like, you're not going to solve anything. And in fact, your worst nightmare is likely to happen. You know, like in this last election, if you're talking to Trump voters, oh no, you should come vote for Joe Jorgensen. Oh yeah, and let Joe Biden get elected. Like, that's the way that they're thinking. And you might think that's silly, but that's how they're thinking. And you want them. You want their attention. You want them to value what you value. So you have to appreciate what they're thinking. You have to appreciate what they feel and how they, what they value and why they value it that way. And it's up to you to make your product compelling to them. If the cost of your product, so in this case, your product is, you want people to buy libertarianism as an ideology and begin acting as a libertarian. If the cost of doing that is they feel like they've lost control of their life and that they're having no positive impact on the world, and that that all the bad things they don't want are all happening now out of their control, if that's how they feel, the cost of your product is too much. You're not giving them anything to latch themselves onto. You're not giving them anything that generates value to them. Ultimately, people want meaning. They want meaning, and they want their problems to be solved. And if you can demonstrate to them how much fulfillment they can get from solving their own problems, if you can make it easy for them, if you can accommodate them, they're much more likely to listen to you. But that takes empathy. If you want to use that as a tool, you have to start with actually being genuinely empathetic. You have to actually care about them. And what I hear with most libertarians talking about this, they don't actually care about the people that they're reaching out to. Like they recognize that they're more cerebral and smarter than them, and they're like, you stupid rubes, you don't understand how the world works. Just sit down and shut up and stop caring about the stuff that you care about. Like student loans. This I was talking about this with Mark Claire this morning. This is what got me into politics in the first place. Feeling like I'd gotten gypped by going to college and taking out these student loans. My whole culture had told me all along that I'm an utter failure if I don't get student loans. If I don't go to college and take out these loans. It's like, whatever. You'll make the money in the future. The cost doesn't matter. You're going through the college process, you're explicitly shamed if you question the idea that taking on debt for a degree might not be worth it. It's like an indicator of, what are you, lazy? You think you're not, you're just not, you don't want to work. Like, you just want life to be handed to you. That's the mentality that you're hit with. So when you're an 18 or 19-year-old kid, I mean, I'm 32 now, and I barely know what I'm doing. I'm just like scrapping, trying to make my way through each day and figuring it out as I go along. At 18, I have no idea what I was doing. I was a kid. I was a kid being impressed upon by my society to do this thing because everybody else does it. And that's, humans are mimicking beings. We just mimic. And so I mimicked the people that were around me. And I got myself tens of thousands of dollars of debt and nothing to show for it, except a good story. That got me into politics because I was like, student loan debt, yeah. We should like, these debts are, it's usury. This is completely unreasonable that kids are expected to make these types of decisions and then they're stuck with it, and even dying doesn't get rid of their debts. Student loan debt is the worst debt to get, like, it's the hardest debt to get rid of, which is completely insane. It makes sense when you think about the incentives involved, but for the kids, they're getting crushed by it. It's destroying their futures. So when you approach someone like that with the message of like, sucks to be you, shouldn't have made a bad decision, suck it up, buttercup, then joke's on you, because they're never going to give you the time of day. They're not going to pay any attention to you. You don't have to say, yeah, we need to have government bailouts of students, but you have to affirm where they're coming from. Yeah, that sucks. You got stuck in a really rough spot. It's completely unreasonable that they did this to you. It's completely unreasonable that you were expected to make that decision and you had to take on all of that, and it's totally unjust that you are in the situation that you're in. Then think outside the box and come up with a way to solve their problem or to give them meaning in pursuing a solution to their problem. But it starts with affirming them. You have to affirm them and recognize that their gripes are legitimate even if you don't believe that they are. And I think from a psychological perspective, once you start approaching problems like this where you are affirming the people who you're talking to and you're actually focused on trying to solve their problems, then that completely changes everything. So what's this guy's name? Lambda School, Austin Allred with Lambda School. He created this program where you can learn how to code it's like 6 months. It's like a 6-month program. It's all remote and you don't pay a cent until you've graduated their program and you've gotten a job. As soon as you get a job, if you're making more than $50,000 a year, then you pay, I think it's 17%. There's an income share agreement. You pay 17% of each paycheck that you get above $50,000 until it's either for 2 years or until you've paid $30,000 or something like that. So there's people who are coming at this from, they were like working at Burger King, or they were the 30-year-old working at Best Buy, and they they had no history, they had no experience with coding, nothing like that. 6 months later, there was one guy. 6 months later, he got a job as a software development team leader, making like $115,000 a year. They paid for his relocation, and his life has been completely transformed. Now, if someone from Lambda School approached him with ideas about libertarianism or something like that, he's going to be much more open and willing to listen to them because they solved his problem first. So back to Carlos and Vanessa at the beginning, they're solving people's problems, then they're telling them about what they believe. This is the Christian prescription, back to the hero's journey and back to embodying Christ. You're supposed to embody the ideas yourself, and then you have a platform to talk to people. If the ideas haven't changed your life, if you don't live a free life, and you're just complaining that it's the state that keeps you from being free, nobody has any reason to listen to you. You have to demonstrate the principles of freedom in your own life. You have to take control of your own life. And you have to solve people's problems, generate value to the world, and then they'll listen to you. And then you can start making a dent in the world. And it just so happens, you'll make a ton of money in the process, which will enable you to start buying politicians of your own. And then you can really make a political change. Oh,
I'm going to do that coding shit.
yeah?
Maybe. Yeah, it's either that or, but I've been thinking about my future. It's either that or just like I'm going to do birth control for fun. I'm not going to just wait for some woman to like pee it out so I can shower in it. I'm just going to take birth controls. I've had such a boring life. I didn't know that the world was going to be over by like in my 30s, you know? Like I've never even been on a roller coaster. I've been around so many performance enhancing drugs and I just never did them. Would have been so great to do them, you know, never like trip mushrooms or anything like that because I thought I'd just get stuck there. If I got stuck there now, who gives a shit? Like it'd be so much better than what's going on right now, you know? So it's either learning to code or just an obscene amount of drugs.
Obviously you've got the brains for coding, and if you like, it's the program is relatively straightforward. I mean, I've seen people go into it who were not anybody special.
You're working a part-time job at Best Buy. At Best Buy. Sorry.
It's so good. You poor folks who have not seen the full in all its glory.
Got a birthday message from,
yes,
from Mr. Stapleton yesterday.
She was dying. That was so funny.
Yeah, you were talking about autism before. If you don't think that for like probably 5 whole minutes in my car would influence.
Uh-oh, did I lose you? Steven, come back. Steven, come back. Well, I think we might have lost him, folks. We'll see if he gets back in here in a minute. And maybe I'm the one that got lost. Maybe you guys can't hear me.
Uh-oh. So
they
can either hear. I am here. I am here.
Okay, well, we're connected again. So who knows which one of us they were hearing all along?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I was basically just, I wanted to communicate to you, and since the topic was autism, that I spent yesterday in my car 5 legitimate minutes listening to Willpower and Influence in just on a millisecond delay, trying to say exactly what Jason was saying at the same pitch, in the same cadence, just driving around, just like, oh, what'd you say? And I'm listening to it and saying it the second I hear it, trying to anticipate what he's going to say. I want to dial that impression in so bad. It's so fun because all he does is, I mean, he's kind of my spirit animal because he really just kind of trashes people. Like when he gets in that mode, he just imagines like the poster boy for every libertarian that he hates and just fucking digs into it. And it's really fun. And so if I can do a voice while I'm doing it and kind of channel his intellect, it's oh god, it's the perfect thing for me.
Yeah, it's
way
great.
better than coding. Way better than coding.
I thought you were going to say way better than Coke.
No, well, that remains to be seen. I'll tell you in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, Isaac Morehouse's Praxis. That's the same concept. Isaac Morehouse is a good guy. Let me get through some of these comments here. I just basically wasn't paying attention to him at all. This basically sounds like astrology to me. Because libertarians are autistic. Leftism and sociopathy are on the same feedback loop. Yeah, yep, they are. They incentivize each other. Libertarians are
you can at least draw. It's more offer than most libertarians working part-time at Best Buy. What are you contributing? Nothing.
One of these days we're gonna have a conversation with him. We'll get him on the show. We'll talk, and you should just talk to him in character as himself the whole time.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Would he be a fan of that? He strikes me as just like, man, maybe a polite laugh, best case scenario, and then all of a sudden there'd be fucking two of his cousins rappelling down my windows and kicking them in, and
he would think it's funny.
He does the show like on Monday wearing like my head as a hat. Yeah, I guess I can do impressions too.
He would have it on that, that canoe paddle he has back here. He would just have it mounted on that.
Be perfect for my life plan, really.
Let me see here. So, libertarians are much better at using reason, but they lack empiricism. You can make the most logical theories all day long, but if you don't check them against reality, then you wind up counting the cycles and epicycles, which is ironic. Libertarians are the ones who talk about praxeology, but they're the ones who do not employ it.
Yep.
Popular Liberty, shout out to him for those concepts. He says, I believe it's impossible to truly understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them as they love themselves. And in that moment, when you love them, then you can destroy them. There's deep truth in that. If you truly get inside someone else's head, if you truly understand them, like I started trying to use this as like a technique or strategy where I just assume everybody that I encounter from their perspective is right. Like their perspective and their response to the events in front of them is correct according to what they've gone through. Like if I was to live their entire life as them, go through everything that they went through, and to encounter that situation in that moment as them, I would make the exact same decision. There's no way to know otherwise. It's impossible, obviously. Like all they ever have is their experience, and all we ever have is our experience, and it's all subjective, and we by definition can't experience their experience. We can only experience our experience of their experience. But if you operate from that perspective, that to me, that's the key. That's the key that unlocks empathy. When you operate from that assumption at the baseline that this person is correct, everything that they're saying from their perspective is correct, and it's my job to bridge the gap between us. It's if people aren't buying my product, it's my job to offer it to them in a way where they will buy it. And this is why if you get involved in business, if you start actually selling a product, you learn this type of thing because you realize, well, if I'm advertising and nobody's buying it, I don't get mad at the people who aren't buying it. I have to change my advertising. It's on me. I need to advertise it differently. I need to change the price. I need to change the wording. I need to get in front of different people. You're the one that has to workshop all of it. And as you start becoming more and more successful, as it starts working, you realize the tools and the approach that you're using. You recognize it as a system, and you can take that system and you can apply it outside of business. You can apply it to relation. Like if you're single and you're trying to find a spouse, it's the exact same process. Everything in life, all interpersonal interaction is all persuasion and sales. From the top to bottom, you're constantly in the process of attempting to persuade other people and selling to them. You're selling something. You're selling your view of the world. You're selling your actual product. You're selling your personality. You're selling your value as a person. This is what civilization is built upon. It's my survival, my thriving within society depends upon you buying me as a person. You accepting what I have to offer. If you don't accept what I have to offer, if you reject me from society and nobody else takes me in, I'm hosed. So it's up to me to make sure that I am a person worthy of being accepted into society. And that comes down to persuasion and sales.
And if you're content with your part-time hours at Best Buy, God bless you. Maybe you work your way up to shift manager. I'm sure it comes with a maybe a 5% raise. God bless you. I'm just asking you to sign up for an email list. But if you don't want to do it, hey, I'll see you when I'm in there. Buying studio equipment with Bitcoin.
The phrase you need to incorporate is the world needs ditch diggers too. or laying asphalt. What is it? Laying asphalt in a Georgia, laying asphalt on a Georgia highway in the dead of summer or something like that. He says that all the time.
Oh, yeah, God, he's got good. I gotta listen some more. I'm gonna work at this because it's maybe. I used to have fun doing like Tracy Morgan. I would get like stuck doing it, but man, Stapleton might outdo Tracy Morgan for me.
I was going to say do your Tracy Morgan, but I don't know if you can just do it on command.
It's just shifting gears. I don't know. That's a hell of a gear shift right there. I stopped doing Tracy Morgan because it would just overtake my life for like a week. I wouldn't be able to stop.
That's what to get all autistic about this. That what you're demonstrating there, that is empathy. Like to do something like that, you have to practice empathy. You have to fully embody someone else in an impression like that. You have to practice empathy, and you have to empathy is just trying to see the world through somebody else's eyes, and then trying to understand where they're coming from and why they do what they do. The more that you do that, the better you can manipulate them. And that's what sales and persuasion is. Sales and persuasion is trying to manipulate people to do what you want. And as Jason says, that can be done for good or for evil. You're muted.
I was gonna say I'm playing the long game to take over his empire. I'm gonna endear myself to him. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, so Jacob, shout out my buddy Jacob. We're going to have him on the show at some point here because he's got just some brilliant insights into a lot of the stuff that we talk about. He said, I'm a hiring manager who has hired folks coming out of coding boot camps. Some no school, some college. No notable difference in their talents. But the surprising thing is how many of them are right out of college. Boston U, Miami, big-time expensive schools. One guy graduated magna cum laude in economics at Miami. So that's $200,000 of debt and a clearly worthless degree for him to instantly go to coding boot camp. And that's just absolute madness to me. It's criminal that nobody makes that decision thinking that this is the best route forward. People who go get a $200,000 degree and all of that debt did it for cultural reasons. They did it because they were led to believe that it was the correct pathway, and ultimately it wound up giving them nothing. They could have done no debt and gone to a coding boot camp and been just in the same spot. I have a little brother who is just turned 20, and I'm trying to talk him into doing Lambda school because I'm like, dude, you're 20 years old. You have no debt at all. He's in the process of buying his first car. He is just wet behind the ears, right on the cusp. And I'm like, go to Lambda school, take 6 months to go through this course. When you finish, he's a really, really smart guy, really hard worker. And I'm like, when you finish, there's a good chance that you'll be making $60,000, $75,000 a year. That's like, I've seen plenty of stories of people who are in his boat who wound up in that spot. And a kid right now who can get a skill set like that, making that kind of money, and that has direction and that person can create an empire. That you have all the potential in the world. That's one of the best situations you could possibly be in. But even you, in your situation, 6 months from now, with your background, with your experience, and with your brain, 6 months from now, you can finish a coding boot camp, and the world's your oyster. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. That's Jason's thing is nomadic wealth, is the nomadic lifestyle, and that would be a perfect formula for being nomadic. You could go live in Saipan with Vin.
Yeah, like with Vin, like in his house.
Yeah, like in his house. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just like sleep at the foot of his bed.
Curl up like a dog. him and his wife start to get amorous, and my energy changes and I just like look sometimes and just start. That'd be funny. Yeah, I'm gonna
like,
go to coding boot camp so I can be Ben's dog. That's great.
I can't wait till we
Super
talk
hot.
to him on here. We have to propose that to him. This is another thought. Jacob said this earlier in the comments. He said libertarianism lacks a sufficient mechanism to duly punish individuals and small groups for behavior detrimental to the rest of us. And that, like, libertarians will recoil from that idea. Oh, we can't punish people. You can't have a society if you don't have the ability to punish people. And obviously, I can hear the autists now talking about, social ostracism and private security agencies, whatever. Yeah, okay, whatever. Like, get us to that point. Give us the technology, give us the social structure to facilitate that, then let's have that conversation. That conversation's decades away. We might as well talk about the material that we would use for building roads on the moon. Or on Venus. The material we would use for building roads on Venus. That's as practical as, the conversation about how you would not violate the non-aggression principle, but still have a way of punishing people in a libertarian society. Okay, it's interesting from an academic perspective, but we have so many problems we have to solve. We have so many things that we need to do before we get to that point. And once we get to that point, then I'm sure you'll be a lot of use to us. But why don't you be useful to us now and help us solve the problems that are immediately in front of us? And one of those is not insufficient control of the Libertarian Party. That's the least of our problems. But apparently, some people think that that's the most important problem to solve today, and I pity them. Anyways, you have anything else you want to say?
No, I'm gonna start enrolling in coding boot camps.
Do it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Buying drugs.
I mean, hey, if you get the right job, if you're good enough at it, then you could probably be on all kinds of stuff while you're working.
You do both, yeah.
That sounds like the libertarian paradise.
Yeah. Do you hear how what a non-drug person? I was like, I would like to buy drugs, please.
I would like to have a drug. Well, which one? All
of them.
One of them.
Your finest drug. Do you have a sampler? Is this like craft beers?
Yeah. You bring it out on a tray.
And I hate to be a pain. I'm kind of. Do you have anything artisanal?
Your finest artisanal drug. Thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us for this hour and a half of fun. We appreciate all of you guys. We would like it if you would go patronize our dear friends.
Show some empathy. Imagine you had half the people in here probably do have fucking podcasts. Don't you like it when people like the video and share it?
Right.
Did you not get anything out of what Matthew was saying today? Show some empathy. Imagine that you were in this position and like the video and share it with people who will tell us that we're brilliant.
Yeah, you know how it works. It's 2021. You guys have followed enough podcasts and YouTube channels and whatever else. Just do the stuff. Just go click some stuff and do some stuff and make us happy. And Magoo wants to know how much for just one drug. If you're into drugs, well, I guess CBD is similar to a drug, but this is interesting. Real quick before we end, rather. One interesting thing to think about is what constitutes a drug. Like, we have this thing we talk about drugs, but like,
yeah, man,
what's a drug?
Yeah, with your coffee every morning. You're as much of a druggie as I am, man. Yeah.
But like is magnesium a drug?
Absolutely.
Because it's like if any definition that you try to use to like define a drug, there's lots of other things that we would not consider drugs that would fall into, like something that changes your consciousness or changes your perception of reality. Well, it's like when I'm hangry, my consciousness is definitely affected. My perception of reality is very different. So,
folks, you can ask Amy. You do not want to be around this man when he's hangry.
This is true.
I'm gonna start doing a thing towards the end of the show where you're wrapping it up. I'm just gonna start taking my shirt off.
Speaking of drugs,
and then we'll just see if you end the show before the shirt comes off. This is getting very hot here.
I'm not going to take my shirt off. I won't put people through that.
So good.
All right, folks. Check out Paloma Verde. Go to palomaverdestore.com. Use promo code KING. 25% off any order over $75. Tell Carlos and Vanessa that you appreciate them. They will let you know that they appreciate you by sending you some of the finest CBD products that you can get. And we will be back again on Monday, probably about something like 1 o'clock on Pacific time, the only time that matters. And my name is Matt. Can be found on Twitter at RealKingPilled. That over there is soon to be Liberal Stephanie, apparently, because he's going to be drowning himself in birth control. So you can follow Liberal Stephanie at Messina Inc. on Twitter, but you cannot find Steven anywhere. He is nowhere to be found except for right here with King Pilled. This is the place you all must be, and we will see you